All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling a topic that's, well, it's pretty meaty, so to speak. Beef in India.
Ooh, yeah. That's going to be interesting.
We're going to unpack like centuries of history, and try to understand how something that was once, well, pretty common became so taboo.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
I think a lot of people have these assumptions about India and beef.
Yeah, you might even end up questioning everything you thought you knew. So for this deep dive, we've got some fascinating excerpts from a book called Beef, Brahmins, and Broken Men, edited by Alex George and S. Anand.
Oh, yeah, I know that one. It's got some great stuff.
It's a collection of writings, and it includes some annotated excerpts from B.R. Ambedkar's The Untouchables. Who were they, and why they became untouchables?
Yeah, that one really gets to the heart of the whole caste system, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not just a simple story about what people eat. It's a window into how food gets tangled up with culture, religion, all that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's about power dynamics, too. Who gets to eat what?
Right. Exactly. So most people, I think, would assume that beef has always been like off limits in India. But our sources, they paint a very different picture.
Yeah, if you go way, way back to the Harappan civilization, like 7,000 BCE.
Whoa, that's ancient.
Long before the arrival of those who call themselves Aryan, you find evidence that buffalo was not only domesticated, but was part of their diet.
So even in those ancient times, beef was, like, on the menu.
Yeah, I mean, food cultures, they change, right? Early Indians, like people everywhere, they ate what was available, what was sustainable.
So it's not this static thing. It's always evolving.
Right, exactly. Over time, those choices get all mixed up with cultural and religious beliefs, and you start to see perceptions change. What was acceptable becomes taboo, and vice versa.
Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit to the Vedic period. Now, this is where we start to see some changes, right?
Yeah, things start to get interesting here.
Ambedkar points to texts like the Rig Veda, which actually mentions cow slaughter and beef consumption.
Right, often in the context of rituals, actually.
Yeah, ritual practices like...
Yeah, there's even a ritual described in the Griya Sutras. It's called Madhuparka. It's a kind of ceremony welcoming ritual, maybe, and sometimes the offering involved beef.
So it wasn't always this universally forbidden thing.
Right. The idea that beef was always taboo, well, it's more complicated than that.
So what happened then? How did we go from ritual offerings to, like, this widespread taboo?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Ambedkar, he suggests a possible link to the rise of vegetarianism, especially among Brahmins, maybe influenced by Buddhism.
Yeah, with its emphasis on nonviolence, ahimsa. You can see how that might,
Right, like we're not going to harm living beings and all that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe the Brahmins, they're looking to assert their social and religious standing, right? And they adopt vegetarianism as a symbol of, like, purity.
So it's not just about spiritual beliefs. It's also about, like, solidifying their position within the caste system.
Exactly. And, you look at inscriptions from, say, the 5th century AD, and they equate killing a cow with killing a Brahmin. Talk about a shift in status.
Whoa. That's intense.
Yeah, suddenly the cow is, like, sacred. Untouchable, almost.
And this is where things get, I think, even more intense. Ambedkar introduces this idea of the broken men.
The broken men, yeah.
Those individuals who, well, for various reasons, they just refused to give up eating beef, even as it became more and more taboo.
And you can imagine what happened, right? They're ostracized, pushed to the margins of society.
So the taboo around beef wasn't just about religion then.
I think it was also a tool, to solidify the caste system. You don't conform. You get pushed down the ladder.
And this connection between food and power, it's something that pops up throughout history, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You see it everywhere. And it's crucial to remember that this historical context is not just some relic of the past. It's still shaping things today.
Right. It's still playing out in contemporary issues around beef in India. It's like the echoes of those ancient power struggles are still reverberating.
I like that. Echoes reverberating.
So let's talk about those echoes, those reverberations. We've got things like the beef festivals organized by Dalit student groups, on university campuses.
Oh, yeah, those are interesting.
And these events, they're often met with pretty strong reactions. Like, why are these events so significant? What's going on there?
Well, you got to imagine, right? These students, they're descendants of those who were historically marginalized, and they're coming together to publicly consume beef.
It's a statement, right?
It's a powerful statement. They're reclaiming their heritage, pushing back against that dominant narrative that's trying to erase their history, their food tradition.
That's more than just a meal.
It's an act of defiance.
Wow. Food as protest. It's powerful stuff.
It's risky, too. The potential backlash.
Yeah.
It's real.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
But there's another layer to this whole beef story that I just find fascinating. Despite the cow's sacred status, India is a major exporter of buffalo beef.
Right. It's this weird paradox.
The cow is revered, but the buffalo is quietly driving a huge industry.
And it's an industry that often benefits Dalit and other marginalized communities, the ones who've traditionally been involved in those beef and leather industries.
So we've got this revered cow, but then the buffalo is the one doing all the heavy lifting, so to speak.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. It's way more complicated than just, cow sacred, beef bad.
Yeah, it's way more nuanced than that. It's a web of cultural, social, and economic complexities. And it's a story that's still unfolding.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think we need to unpack that a bit more. This is where it gets really interesting. It's like the story of beef in India. It kind of reveals a lot about how policies and regulations can be used to either support or marginalize certain communities.
Right.
Like take the 2017 government regulations, the ones that tighten the rules around the cattle trade.
Oh, yeah, those regulations caused a lot of controversy.
Supposedly to protect cows.
Yeah, I remember reading about how they disproportionately impacted people who relied on the cattle industry, like particularly Dalit, Muslim, and other marginalized groups.
Right.
It's almost like history repeating itself, with those who have traditionally worked with cattle facing exclusion yet again.
Yeah, it is a striking parallel to what Ambedkar described with the broken men.
Right.
Not only do these regulations, cause economic hardship for these communities, but they carry this symbolic weight.
Yeah.
It's like their traditional livelihoods and food choices are being demonized,
Right.
further reinforcing their position at the bottom of the social hierarchy.
It's a stark reminder that what we eat isn't just a personal choice.
No,
It can become entangled with issues of identity power and even basic human rights.
for sure.
This whole conversation, it's making me think about those beef festivals we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
The ones often held on university campuses by Dalit student groups.
Right.
These events, they're about so much more than just food,
Absolutely.
aren't they?
They really are. It's powerful. You have to imagine these students, right, often from backgrounds where beef was a traditional part of their diet, coming together to publicly consume it.
It's like they're reclaiming that part of their history.
Exactly. It's an act of
Yeah.
reclaiming their heritage. It's pushing back against that dominant narrative that tries to erase their history, their food culture.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, we're here, we're not going away, and we're not going to be ashamed of who we are and what we eat.
Right.
But as you mentioned before, these events often spark controversy and even violence.
Unfortunately, yes. The reactions to these festivals really underscore just how deeply rooted these tensions are.
Yeah.
They're a stark reminder of the centuries of discrimination and oppression that are woven into the fabric of Indian society, and how the issue of beef continues to act as a flashpoint for those historical wounds.
It's a sobering thought, really.
It is.
And it makes me appreciate Ambedkar's work even more.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't afraid to dig into these uncomfortable truths
No, he wasn't.
and challenge the accepted narratives, even when it came to something as seemingly simple as what people eat.
Ambedkar's work, it's so critical because he meticulously dismantles the idea that vegetarianism has always been the norm in India.
Yeah.
He points to countless examples from ancient texts showcasing how beef consumption was once widespread. He really forces us to question the assumptions we've been fed
Right.
and to consider whose voices have been silenced in the creation of those dominant narratives.
It's like he's saying, don't just accept what you're told. Dig deeper, look at the evidence, question the sources.
Yeah.
And that's such an important message, not just for understanding the history of beef in India, but for understanding any historical narrative, really.
Oh, absolutely. We need to be critical thinkers. We need to examine the context in which these narratives were created.
Right.
And to be aware of the power dynamics they might be reinforcing.
Yeah, whose voices are being amplified and whose are being left out.
Right.
It's about peeling back the layers.
Yes.
Not just accepting a single story, but considering the multitude of experiences and perspectives that make up a society as diverse and complex as India.
And that's why this whole conversation about beef in India is so much bigger than just food.
Right.
It's a lens through which we can examine these deeper issues of identity power, social justice.
Exactly. It helps us understand how those historical power structures, those social hierarchies, continue to shape the lives and choices of people today.
And it reminds us that the struggle for equality and justice is ongoing.
It's about recognizing that seemingly everyday things, like what we choose to eat, can be imbued with a much deeper significance.
Yes.
And that understanding that deeper significance can help us better navigate the complexities of the world around us.
And it prompts us to ask those uncomfortable questions, to challenge our own assumptions, and to be more mindful of the impact of our own choices and actions.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation already.
It really has.
I'm really starting to see how food and beef in particular can act as a mirror reflecting the intricate dynamics of a society.
It really is fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really incredible, isn't it? Like something as basic as, what we eat can reveal so much about a culture.
It's true. It's more than just sustenance. It's about tradition, community, identity. And as we've seen, it can be a very powerful symbol of resistance.
It makes you think about all the different food customs and taboos that exist all over the world and how they reflect like deeper cultural beliefs.
Power dynamics too. Who gets to decide what's acceptable, what's not?
It makes you wonder about the stories behind those traditions, Like what can we learn from them?
It's a reminder that food is never simple. Our relationship with food is complex. And I think we often make assumptions about other cultures based on their food practices.
Yeah, without really understanding the context, the history.
And the meaning.
So while we've gotten this glimpse into this fascinating and sometimes contentious history of beef in India, it's also a reminder that there's always more to learn.
Always. More perspectives to consider.
So I'll leave our listeners with one final thought-provoking question. If the cow's sacred status is, it's a relatively recent thing, right? And even today, the buffalo is, the buffalo plays a much bigger role in India's economy,
right?
In the lives of many communities. What does that tell us about the narratives we hear about Indian culture and identity?
That's a good question.
Are those narratives complete? Are they accurate?
Who are they serving?
Yeah, exactly. Who are they serving? So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and, keep challenging your own assumptions. Until next time, happy deep diving.